put those here for you in your reading. So malice or anger. And then they say, so those are the afflicted state of mind. And then the unafflicted, which I was struggling with this morning as I was looking at this class again, and I was sort of going, what does that really mean that it's unafflicted? Because laziness is still an affliction at a certain level. So I'm saying I need to think about that more, why it's stated like that. But here we can see there's regular laziness, and then there's spiritual laziness, okay, which is failing to take joy in doing good deeds, which is related to what perfection? Yeah, joyful effort, okay? So if you remember, the combatant to joyful effort is to overcome your laziness. Not having joyful effort is spiritual laziness, period, okay? And joyful effort is the link. It's like the keystone in the bridge. So you have giving, you have non-harming through ethics. So you're letting go of your attachment, you're letting go of your anger, you're letting go even more deeply of your anger in patience. Then you get to the keystone. If you've clarified that's enough, you get to the keystone of joyful effort, where you have enough space in your being where you can take joy in your spiritual practice, where your spiritual practice isn't an onus anymore because you're so attached to things you don't want to give anything. You know, you're so concerned about yourself, you can't really take care of others. And you're so pissed off, you're so, taken up with your grudges, you can't deal with any patience, and you have no room to recognize the gratitude for the moments where you have patience all day long, actually, meaning you're not bothered. I mean, how many moments did you go through this class where you weren't actually overly bothered? Gratitude for those, right? So that as you create that space, you fall into joyful effort, which is where you have gratitude. You have some kind of wind behind your practice, and you want to keep doing these things. And that moves you into the space to be able to concentrate more deeply, to meditate, which leads you into wisdom, okay? So this is sort of like the bridge from suffering to enlightenment, is going through these 6 spaces. And joyful effort is really, if you don't have that, you can't move into the deeper forms of concentration and wisdom. So again, please keep looking at your laziness, really key. So the 35th vow, 35th secondary vow, is broken into 8 vows, which often happens throughout. So if you decide to take these vows and we meet about it, I'll give you a list of the vows and you're going to go, wait a second, there's like 100 vows here, okay? But that's just because they've broken out ones that have more than one thing in them. So failing to help someone in need who is trying to undertake a particular task. And this means in particular that they're trying to do something for the Dharma. They're working for a community, they're trying to undertake you could say a spiritual task, okay? They're trying to undertake a spiritual task, a positive spiritual task. They're trying to get somewhere. And that is just straightforward, like, someone asks you, how do I get to Culver City, okay? All the way up to, how do I get enlightened? Okay, someone's trying to get somewhere. They're trying to learn a language. So here you can think, if you're like me and you have pretty much 0 skill in your pocket with actual other languages, then I think, well, loving someone is a language, is a form of language. Dance is a form of language, right? There's all kinds of forms of languages. There's all kinds of ways we communicate. Language is a way to communicate. Food is a language, for sure, right? So think about what people are asking you, how can you help them learn a language? Or if they want to learn French, you can point them to someone else who actually knows French, right? So trying to learn a helpful skill. Trying to protect their belongings in some way or another. Trying to fix a split. If someone else is trying to fix a split between people and you fail to help them do that, which can be as simple as just in your mind supporting that. So, at the base level of all of these is that in your mind you should be going, yes, I support you in what you're doing. That you are moving through your day now as a bodhisattva only in support of others. You're not seeking how to take them down. You're not trying to get over them for your own gain. You're just going, how can I help you in your practice? Maybe I have never met you. I don't really know your practice. So in my mind, I'm going, I don't know you, but I support you. I want the best for you, right? We talked about that, I think, in the first or second class. Like just moving through the day going, I hope things are going well for you. And if you need my help, I'd love to help you if I could. Like having that energy for people. And people, of course, will read that energy. And then they'll start to ask you for help. And then you actually like have to do something, for them. So planning a virtuous event of some kind, or undertaking some other general virtue, which basically covers any other possibility that could come up, okay? So the exceptions are, again, if you're sick, if you've already committed that time to helping someone else, if you can refer them to someone else who's more capable, for instance, like I was talking about in learning a language. And that, that one's really key because it helps combat your pride. Or it helps combat the part of you that doesn't want to say, I don't know anything about that, because most of the time we want to say, oh yeah, I know that. Yeah, I can help you, right? And if you're trying to help someone fix their car and you don't know how to fix their car, you could like explode their vehicle, right? So, let alone spiritually, right? If you're not very good at the thing they need done, that's sort of similar. If the thing they're trying to do is harmful, against the Dharma, which would mean, in my interpretation, okay, this is the way I try to work it out for myself, because Dharma just becomes a blah word very quickly. Dharma, what is that? So Dharma means reality, Dharma means spiritual practice, Dharma is the thing that holds you up against suffering, away from suffering. So if someone is doing something against the Dharma, it would mean that you are intuiting that they are doing something that is taking them away from their path, whatever their highest path is. You sense that that person is going astray, and you would want to try to help them if you felt they were going astray, right? Or if it's against your vows. You could also say here with this exception that if helping that person took you away from your Dharma, your path, right? That would mean it would be an exception to this vow. So you wouldn't help them if helping them was taking you off of your own spiritual path, okay? If they have some other means to get it done, and this, this one has to do with priorities, like, and you've all already come up with this in your life, all kinds of people ask all kinds of things from you, and then you have to ask yourself, okay, am I the only one who can do this? Or like, can someone else help this person? And and then it's not about judging, but you might say, can so-and-so help you with that? Or try to sense out, because sometimes you are the only one that can help them actually. And that has a different karma to it, we would say. If you remember the vow about giving, if you're the only one they can turn to for money, you're more responsible actually for giving them that money or for trying to help them with that, because they don't have any other options, okay? And if it would be a problem for others to see you helping in this way, so again, that's sort of the what's going to be best for the greater whole. And then I like this one, if helping them creates more problems than it fixes, okay? So this is all about discernment, and we offer all these possibilities again because these are keeping these vows means you're living your life is your path, and everything is relative, and you're going to come up with all kinds of complex situations. And so at the end of the day, you just ask yourself, what is better for the other person? What's going to serve their path? Or we went to this, I taught at this ashram in Australia, and the woman that runs it, this amazing woman, her name is Swami Atma, and Lama Cindy was telling me about a story when they first went there, and they were talking about the split of the money from the retreat. And Lama Cindy was saying she was sort of doing her, bodhisattva, amazing bodhisattva thing, where it was like, it's okay, like, we don't need anything, you take the money, it's fine. And Swami Atta just looked at her and she's like, we will do what is mutually beneficial for us, which was actually the higher teaching. It was just like, it's not good for me if I take all the money and you have no money. We have to consider what is mutually beneficial for all of us here. So they figured out some split that made sense for them, and it was a great teaching. Okay, so the next one is failing to serve the sick. And the exceptions are basically the same as the above. So if someone's sick and you have the opportunity to serve them, that's a wonderful opportunity. Particularly, it's a wonderful opportunity because you can confront all of your resistance to your own mortality that comes up when you're with people who are ill. And all of the resistance that you might have to weakness and to the body itself and what happens to the body, if you're someone who has strong resistance to that. Some people have, it's very easy for them to serve the sick, but for others, it's my ex-husband Brian. His family, his grandmother was failing, and I was around his family a lot during this time. And he has his mother and then an aunt, so his mother has a sister, and they're sort of like, the two women, and their mother was failing. And it was this really interesting situation because Roz, the one aunt, she had no problem like dealing with the mother's incontinence, dealing with all of these things that happen with the aging. And for his mother, it was like she just couldn't handle that. But meanwhile, the mother, Brian's mother, had housed the grandmother for like 15 years and was sort of like taking care of her on this financial sort of level. And then Aunt Roz was the one who would actually go in the bathroom and like deal with that. So it's not saying that one is better or the other. It was sort of like Roz couldn't handle the other side, sort of like planning the doctor's appointments and doing all these things. So we all have, what we're available for. And these bodhisattva vows are trying to expand our capabilities, trying to push us into areas where we're not so comfortable. And again, we need to be mindful. We need to know our limitations, our limits, and sense out what is taking me too far, where can I work, where I'm uncomfortable but I can do it, so I'm growing. That would be really good, okay? Next one is failing to attempt to remove the suffering of those who are, here goes the list, blind, deaf, handicapped, weary from traveling, tormented by any of the 5 mental obstacles. Those, by the way, are the 5 obstacles to meditation, which we had in the, so you can go back and look at the vows to meditation, the being distracted by restless desires, attraction to bad things, those ones, okay? Suffer from thoughts such as malice or suffering from the defeat at the hands of someone else, okay? So again, it's sort of like a catch-all vow that's saying, you just try to remove everyone's suffering, anyone you come in contact with, okay? That is your sole role now, is an angel of relief of suffering, an agent to relieve the suffering and support others. The next one is failing to attempt to reason with those who are acting in a dangerous way. So this is similar to a vow we had earlier in terms of the relationship of why would we not reason with someone who's acting in a dangerous way? Do we want them not, are we afraid that they're not going to like us? Are we, what are the reasons why we don't enter those situations where we have to be a little bit more direct with people and say, it's not okay that you're doing this. And that could be watching the way someone relates to someone else. Like, I don't know the person you were bringing up, but sometimes you see people acting a certain way, and it really is your responsibility to speak about it. You got to be mindful that you're not judging that person, but you got to leave a little space that maybe you don't know the situation. I always think of this when I see parents. Like, sometimes I see parents in stores and they're like yelling at their kid, or I see them like smack their kid, and this thing comes up in me where I'm like, don't do that, But I think I don't know the situation, and then I have a friend who has a child who's really hyperactive, and it's like the only way she can get him to calm down is like she has to like sometimes physically shake him, and actually that's out of love. So, you have to sort of go, okay, like where's my line and all of that. Or if someone's relating to you, someone's abusing you physically, verbally, you want to have the strength to say, this is not okay. I will not relate to you in this situation. It's not okay that you speak to me that way. It's not okay. I had this in my life with someone who was verbally abusive, and I didn't speak for a period of time because I was afraid of losing my job. It was my boss at that time. And at a certain point, I realized in my soul that I was not okay living like that, and that the job really wasn't that important. And he was sort of overwhelmed because no one had ever sort of said that. And I left. I didn't even give them a chance to fire me. I just said, it's not okay with me to work here in these circumstances. So why wouldn't you speak with someone who's acting in a dangerous way? For them. It's not dangerous for you, but you recognize that by someone verbally or physically abusing you, that is dangerous for them. It is not good for their mind to see themselves hurting you. So this is all about the other person, okay? Of course, it's not good for you either, but the impulse is, I'm trying to help you from something that's really going to hurt you, okay? So here are the exceptions. If you're not capable of explaining to them why it is a problem. So you might say to someone, you shouldn't hit your child, and they'll go, well, why? I don't like it. It's sort of like, you have to have a really substantial, you would have to be able to inspire them to want to act differently, you see. You would have to have the power to inspire them to their greater self. Otherwise, you're just judging them, and that creates more separation, okay? If you see that they'll correct it themselves, so that happens sometimes that you would, especially in the Sangha, when we're all together and we're all working on our mental afflictions together, just like, you can have a little trust that if people have vows, they're really trying to work it out on their own, and maybe give them a little time to try to sense it out, or to come to you and apologize, or whatever it might be. If you know that they have their own teacher who will correct them, so this is sort of implying that in a way, you become a teacher to someone when you act in this way. And if you know that person has a spiritual teacher or some kind of spiritual support, or a therapist or something like that, then you might think they're in their path, they're in their journey, And I often do this with people who come to me who are dealing with some kind of mental, psychological situation. And my first question is always, do you have a therapist? Are you seeing a therapist? And do you like your therapist? Like, is your therapist actually working for you? Because oftentimes they'll say no. And then it's like, okay, well, that's why we're in this situation. But sometimes they'll say, yeah, I feel good with the therapist. And then it's like, okay, so actually you don't need my input that much right now. You have support. And then I more just try to support them continuing to go to that support, right? If they hate you, and they'll do the opposite just to spite you, it can happen. It can happen because we see it in ourselves, right? Someone corrects us and we're like, you know what? I'm going to do the other thing. Similar, if they won't listen to you. If you think they will learn more by making the mistake. And, there you have to, again, really judge what is the degree to the mistake, and are they mindful enough that they're watching, so that when they make the mistake, like, thank you for bringing that up the other day where you're like, well, criticized and then, oh, I recognized, right? So if you realize that that person is spiritually mature enough that they're tracking, then again, you'd want to find a way to support that and maybe bring that more into awareness and support their tracking. But no, we learn by failing. That's the way we learn. And it's hard, it's so hard to watch people fail and watch people in pain. But I know the best teachers I've had, and it was excruciating for me, but the best teachers I had, they let me fail in a big way. And it was excruciating at the time. But when I look back, the most profound lessons I've had in my life were from those teachers who just let me make big mistakes. And, but I always felt like when I look back in retrospect, they were there. If I had made a really big mistake, they wouldn't have let me do that. But they let me go just enough that my ego was demolished. And that wasn't nice at that time. But I'm really grateful for it later, So next one is failing to help someone who's helped you. So this is about gratitude, recognizing all the support that people are giving you. And it's not so much about like, oh, you gave me some tea, so I have to give you some tea. It's not so much about tracking like that. But it means opening yourself to all of the support that beings are giving you and generating compassion and gratitude, which naturally will allow you to want to help them back in a way that's meaningful for them. So, if Tanel gives me a cup of tea, she may not need a cup of tea. It's not about just doing that right back. It's like, well, but I'm grateful, so I'm aware of you in my sphere, and I want to support you. Exceptions, which are sort of helpful hints, actually, if you're waiting for a better opportunity to repay them, and if they would be embarrassed or uncomfortable or would prefer not to be repaid. So if you're repaying them would actually cause them affliction, okay? In an outward way, repaying them, right? You can always repay them in your mind, which you should constantly be doing by generating gratitude. Failing to dispel another person's grief, and the exceptions here are if it wouldn't help because it would upset them more, or some other reason. So sometimes there are many ways to look at this exception, okay? But one way to think about it, and maybe you've had this experience, is sometimes another person's grief is so acute that in a way to move into it is too painful in that moment. And so we want to be sensitive to the people that we're relating to, and always to ask, are they giving us the opening? Are they asking us, either verbally, physically? You can read the signs of people's physical body, you know, or how are they making the opening? And if there's no opening there, you know, to come to someone who's just been raped or whose husband has just committed suicide or something like that, and to say, like, you know, how are you doing? Let's talk. This must be so horrible for you. Even, you know, it might be really genuine. You really want to help that person, but if the space isn't there, they need time to process internally or whatever it is that they're going through, right? And you should give that to yourself too. So I would say you can recognize for yourself when you're processing grief to be mindful and discerning. When are you ready to make space for other people? Because immediately they just do have ideas. They have lots of helpful hints for you. And you may or may not be in a space to process that yet. So you want to judge for yourself, okay? And it's all right to say to another person, you know, thank you, I feel your compassion, but I'm not in a place to talk about this right now. You know, you can do that in a loving way and not turn their compassion away, but just say, you know, I'd rather not talk about this right now. And make sure you're not isolating. So there's always that line, right? And then, of course, if you're not capable, so you just don't feel able to process that person's situation or to relate to them in a way that's going to be meaningful for them. And that also is a sign of maturity. So you're reading your own limitations. A term that came up, Dima, do you remember what was Reverend Ann saying? It was like your sphere of experience or your sphere of, do you remember what she was talking about? She was saying, like, this is outside of my sphere of expertise. You know, so there are arenas, like, you know, people come to me with psychological problems sometimes, and I go, this is out of this, I'm not a trained therapist. This is out of my sphere of expertise. And that happens sometimes with the level of other people's grief, where you want to help them, but maybe they're in a deep depression, or, you know, you might not be able to reach out to them. So then, of course, what would you do? You try to find an outlet for them. You try to support them in a way you can, and, you know, find other avenues for them to get support. But again, it's helpful for them for you to know your own limits so you can relate properly. So when you are being supportive, you really can provide the support. Okay? Almost there. Failing to give material things to someone who wants them. So this is back to letting go of attachment. Exceptions are if it would be harmful for them to have it, or in order to teach them a lesson. There should be like big red stars around that. So it's like, be mindful about that. You have to have a pretty high level of spiritual awareness to compassionately teach another person a lesson, right? Compassionately. Not because, I'm not giving you this chocolate. You need to learn a lesson about eating chocolate, right? Whatever like judgments are coming up in your mind. That would not be the way to keep this vow. You know, other exceptions would relate to the vows we had earlier, like if you don't have the material thing to give to them, etc. All right. Failing to fill the needs of your spiritual disciples on the spiritual and physical levels. So you you may be someone who has very direct and sort of formal spiritual students, or you may be someone like most of us who your spiritual students are anyone you come in contact with. You should be serving their spiritual needs, okay? But this is traditionally, and I find this very important and moving in the Buddhist tradition, is that the teacher supports the student. This is why all teachings are by donation. We are not communicating on a level of commerce. And it's actually flipped to the other side, where like in the monasteries, the teacher pays for the student. You know, if you go to a monastery in Tibet or you go to an ashram in India, they will pay for you. They feed you, they clothe you, you don't offer them anything. And that's so flipped to the way we treat education, you know, in America. I mean, you know, in the Christian church, you still see it. They'll pass around the donation basket. They're not like, it's $20 to get in here or something, right? So now part of the way you support your students is that you make sure they can support themselves. So, you know, that might mean you do create circumstances where they have to pay for things, or you make sure they have steady jobs or things like that. But as a teacher, and you know, we can all think about this, and it's hard if you start to extend it out to all beings, you don't need anything from anyone, which is different than saying, I'm separate from everyone. You're connected to everyone. You personally, individually, are not in need. You are there as a form of service to others, okay? You are connected and in a form of service. So if you can generate the view as you go through your day, and it's just a good feeling to go through your day and say to yourself, I don't need anything. I have enough, right? We talked about this already. I have enough, okay? What do you need? And then eventually you create the space where you go, I have enough, you have enough. How can we play? How can we support each other? How can we be mutually beneficial, right? In our abundance, how can we be mutually beneficial in this situation, okay? Exceptions if you're sick, if they can take care of themselves, if you think there's a lesson to be learned. Failing to get along with someone is the next one. Great vow, pretty clear. Just get along with everyone. You know, I love these vows so much because it's not like, now, how would I fail to get along with someone? That's a very complex vow, you know? It's like, pretty clear, okay? Pretty clear because everyone started laughing. You know, we're all like, oh, right. And this particularly is related to what it's pointing to traditionally is someone that you don't get along with. So it's saying, don't ignore the people in your life that you're holding grudges against. Go, in fact, particularly go towards them and try to heal that space, okay? And then you can take it on a more general sense as you go through your day, is like, stop letting all those little annoyances throw you off. You know, I mean, we're all so annoyed by so many ridiculous things, you know, and then we like separate ourselves from others, and we push them away from us, and that's all related to this vow, failing to get along with them. The exceptions are if you think reaching out to them would make you like them even less. So, I mean, this happens, you know, sometimes we have such a bad view of someone that even getting in the room with them, it's hard for us. So again, these are our own limitations. So we have to acknowledge that and go, okay, wow, I got to work on that. If I can't be in the room with someone, or like, you know, the caller ID comes up and I don't want to answer the phone, that's not a free person. That is a person in bondage, okay? And I don't want to be a person in bondage, so I need to clear that space somehow. Either by working directly with the person or working internally in meditation and clearing some of my obstacles. And then, of course, if it would, you know, in general, if anything would require you to do something harmful to yourself or others, it's not in line with the vow. All right, last three, failing to praise someone's good qualities. So, in general, praising others, and we talked about this last week a lot. If you think it would make them uncomfortable to outwardly praise them, of course, then it's not in support of them. If you honestly think that you're not praising them because they would get a big head, right? In other words, you would create an affliction in them. So, you might know that someone really struggles with pride, and you see them do something quite extraordinary, but out of compassion and love for them, you think, I'm just gonna hold off right now because they're working in that space, and that out of love, right? Out of love, not because I would just rather not say it. And if they're teaching something wrong, so you could think of this like, people, this goes back to the reliances thing. So someone might give a stunning teaching in terms of their articulation and their energy and all of these things, but they're saying like, you should go kill cats, go kill cats, go kill cats, and everyone's like, oh, wow, that was so like, I was caught under the haze of your teaching, You don't want to praise that. So again, what is the meaning? What is this person trying to offer you? That's what matters, okay? I thought I lost Lindsay and Rick's cat today. I didn't. It was such a horrible feeling. I got up and I realized that the door was open. I had opened the door at some point, and then I was like, the cat is gone. And this cat is always present. And I couldn't find the cat, but I found it. I wanted to give a confession there. Because I was immediately like, how am I going to tell them? What do I say? Right? Okay, so failing to cut someone off when the time has come to do so. So this is similar to the vows about sort of cutting, what was the vow we had earlier? Sorry, how was that stated? Failing to attempt to reason with someone who's acting in a dangerous way, okay? This is similar. So there's 3 ways we cut people off. By chastening them. This should be chastening. I don't think that's right, actually. Sorry, let me look that up and clarify that next week. I think it should be chastening, but maybe it is chastising. I have to look it up. Let me look that one up before I talk about it. I have to remember. The other 2 are right. Punishing them in some way or another, or cutting them off by expelling them from the group. This is related to times when you have to really use force. The story that my teacher always tells about this, and I'll tell his story because it's very clear, is that he was teaching a particular class, and as most Dharma classes, any good Dharma class, it had compassion and it had emptiness. And this particular student would always leave when he started to talk about emptiness, which is harmful because basically it's creating an impression in this person's mind that they don't want to hear about wisdom. They only want to hear about compassion. It's sort of like if you've taken yoga, or when I taught yoga regularly, sure enough, there was someone or multiple people who would leave before Shavasana. They just couldn't stand laying down and being still. That's not good for them, because that's actually the most important posture of the whole class, is to practice death and to practice resting. So for a person for it to be okay to allow a student to keep turning away from a core of the practice, so eventually he had to say to this person, you can't come back. I mean, I think first he said, you can't leave early, but then the person kept leaving early, and then he said, I'm sorry, you can't come to my class anymore. And from the way he tells the story, that person was really upset, really angry with him, but doesn't matter. It's like, what's going to be best for them? And sometimes you have to use force. Yeah?
What comes to mind in this one is like there's maybe an aggressive homeless person or something hanging out where there's like a patio area at a restaurant, and like the manager has to come out and say like, please like move just to the end of our patio area because like you're disturbing them.
Yeah.
Like I've seen that before.
Yeah.
In my car. I'm like, whoa, that's weird. What's happening?
Yeah, no, that's a great example. It's like any time that a sort of forceful energy has to be used because the behavior is not appropriate for that person. Again, it has to be about that person, but sometimes you see it in class, like, people who are constantly interrupting the teacher, are constantly asking questions in a way that's really not supporting the process of the class. Out of support to that person's mind, you have to say, you can't ask any more questions, but it's not comfortable for people like me who still have concerns about, still has things come up about like, I'm sorry, I didn't want to be mean to you, but it's like, you got to say it. It's for the other person. Yeah, if their presence is harmful, right? So the last one, which is like the best vow ever, is failing to use supernormal powers to threaten someone when needed. Yeah. So I might talk more about this one next week because it's 4:30, and this actually is, it has a little way to drop out to think about it. But what I would ask, don't worry about the second part of the vow, but between now and next week, ask yourself what supernormal powers you have. Okay? Everyone in this room has them, for sure. And it might be helpful for you to think about what are your cartoon versions of supernormal powers, which we also all have, whatever you think you somehow have. And then you can ask yourself, can I concentrate on someone else for 10 minutes? Can I get the money that I need to support other people? There are all kinds of supernormal powers that we have that come with our practice. And again, most of the time we miss them because we're looking for some cartoon version of something, okay? So I'll talk about that more next week. Any questions about anything before we close? Yeah?
I have a question about failing to serve the sick. Does
Yeah.
that mean that you need to go out and actually, try to go seek some sick people and help them?
It could. Again, this is where you have to get discerning about your practice. So you want to start to look at once you've learned all the vows, you look at the vows as a whole and you say, okay, would it be useful to the whole for me right now to go seek out and serve the sick? Because maybe I have aversion to doing that, or, but if you felt like, well, then I'm going to get distracted from my meditation practice or something, it might not be the best thing for you to do. So it's not necessarily saying you have to do that. It's pointing, if someone comes to you and asks you for help, it's pointing to that. But it's nice that you jump to that, because with all of these vows, we should be asking ourselves, they're providing us avenues for service. So they're saying, you could go serve someone who's trying to learn a language. You could serve someone who's trying to create a Dharma center. You could serve someone who's sick, right? Here are all these avenues. Are you serving anyone, right? Like, who are you serving? And then know your limitations, right? So it may be, if you have an impulse towards that and that's moving for you, then I'd say, yeah, you should go seek out serving the sick. And maybe that's a talent you have, And or if you feel strong aversion towards it, you should probably try to find some avenue for that, just to encounter it, to see what it is there. But it's not saying, no, you have to do that. You have to go seek it out. It's saying bring yourself into awareness of it, because you're meeting sick people all day long, for sure. It's not just physical sickness. You're encountering sick people all day long. So how are you serving them, right? Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay, so let's do a quick dedication. Close your eyes. So again, bring yourself back to that sensation of openness, space where boundaries have fallen away, where there's ease, spaciousness. Remind yourself that you have this in your being all the time, and that it's there for you when you wish to recall it. And make a prayer that by studying these teachings, making the efforts to come to a class, and by focusing your attention for 3 hours, which is quite a task, that you can send this openness, this spaciousness out to all others through the way you live and the way you relate and the way you love, so that you might receive the great joy and bliss of recognizing that openness and spaciousness in others and receiving it back as a blessing from them and offering it back as a blessing to them, and back and forth in a beautiful play and dance with all the world. No obstacles. No suffering anywhere. Open play, mutually beneficial, with lots of joy. May it be so. Thank you so much for coming, for sticking in there. Appreciate it. And so we'll finish up next week. I know some of you have trips.